Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and this is my weekly wrap-up. So this week's wrap-up will actually cover 2 weeks because last week I posted my April recap rather than a weekly wrap-up. So this will cover the past 2 weeks. But the truth is, the first week of the 2 weeks, I didn't read a great deal. I did, however, celebrate my birthday and it was wonderful and fantastic. Had a great week at school. My birthday also coincided with Teacher Appreciation Week at school. And so there were all kinds of cards and gifts. I got some amazing cards from my students who expressing their appreciation and their love. One was so sweet. A kindergarten mom told me that her daughter loves music class so much she decided she wants to be a music teacher when she grows up. Now, I would be shocked if that continues all the way through her years at school, but to think that she felt that way in kindergarten, I love that. So anyway, I didn't get a great deal of reading done. I talked already last week about how I put a pause on The Heir of Redcliffe by Charlotte M. Young, and we'll be picking that up again. I may have another clip about that later on in this video, depending on if I get back to it. I'm also still working on Les Miserables and The Dead Shall Rise. So some ongoing works in progress, but I did want to make a quick clip because I have to return these books to my sister this evening. I read the first 2 volumes of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, and I loved these. They were so fun. Like, not 100% realistic. Like, you have to throw realism out the door, okay? But not necessarily in terms of characters. Like, the character development was fantastic. And a little bit on this, like, characters a little bit on the zany side, kind of Dickens-esque in that sense, in a way. Maybe hints of not quite realistic things going on, but I'm not sure how she's going to work with those later. I do think some of her other books have like fantastical elements, so I'm not sure if that's in play here or if there's going to be a realistic reason for that. I don't know yet. If you know, let me know. It doesn't really matter one way or the other. I'm enjoying this story. I just really love the creativeness of that. I love that. I love the epistolary aspect of it. It's journal entries, for the most part, very realistic journal entries. Like, some of them are just short, this is what I did today, or just one thought. But some of them are longer. Some of them relate dialogue, which I don't think is quite as realistic, but I'm not sure that you can have a good book without that, so it doesn't bother me. But it's very interesting. I love it. I was looking on the author's website and she was saying how she kind of had this in mind as like a written form of a TV series. And so I think she was saying that each volume is representative of one season of the TV series, and that the journal entries in there are episodes in the series. I think that's what she said. But it's set in late Victorian London in a neighborhood called St. Crispian's. There are a lot of funny names in the story, like she lives on Whereabouts Lane, and the school that she went to was called Fortitude, a school for ladies, and the school that she could have gone to was Miss Prim's School for Girls. Anyway, the character Emma Lyon, she is a young lady, I think like around 21 years old, and I won't give you the whole backstory of everything because just so you can kind of go into it blind and enjoy it if you have not read it like me or don't know anything about it. But one thing I will say is that she loves to read. And what's very interesting is at the very beginning of the first volume, she is starting to read Paradise Lost by John Milton, which is one of the books slated for me to read this month, at least to start on, because my son read it for his high school literature class and I want to read it. And so it was funny that she started to read it and then the book was taken from her through a set of circumstances, but she still often refers to it. So I also started reading Paradise Lost and I thought that was a fun little connection. But she loves to read in general, and there's a lot of reference to the books that she's reading as well as other books. There's a whole bunch in there about Jane Eyre. There's a whole thread in the story. So readers will love this story. Totally fun. I love the fresh approach to the writing, and it kind of makes me curious to read the author's other books, even though I have never been interested in them before because of the genre and the story types, but her writing is just great. So it makes me feel like I would probably enjoy them. Anyway, I can get the other volumes on Kindle Unlimited, so I think I will make good use of my subscription and read them I don't know when, because I do have a whole list of things that I really want to get to in May, so I may not pick them up, but I definitely enjoyed the first 2 volumes and will be reading the rest of the volumes soon. I am enjoying this mood read May very much. I read this one, Where the Blue Sky Begins, which I have been wanting to read ever since I heard a lot of people talking about it last year. And also this author, Katie Powner, has been on my want to read list for a little while. So I picked it up in the library and I just finished reading it yesterday and I really enjoyed it. It had a strange mixture of moments where I laughed out loud quite heartily, and then moments when I had tears in my eyes. So it runs the gamut of human emotion. This book reminded me of The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp due to some of the themes in the book and the primary storyline. So one of our main characters is facing the end of her life. And so it's really talking about what that's like, the emotions that someone goes through and how it affects a young man who comes to know her and befriend her, and how it softens his heart, how it gives him an eternal perspective, and how he changes as a result of how she is approaching her impending death. Mrs. Kipp is very much similar to that, but the big difference is that Mrs. Kipp is an older woman who has lived a long and full life, and she is dying without any regrets. In her passing, she is influencing other people by the amazing self-sacrificing life that she lived and all that she was able to accomplish. This story has a very different perspective because our main protagonist is dealing with many regrets at the end of her life. And her life is being cut short by cancer. And in addition to all of the frustrations and emotions that come with her body slowly shutting down, she is dealing with emotions of regret and a desire to seek resolution for wrongs that she has done. Some of them minor things and some of them big things that negatively affected other people's lives. And so the main part of this story is about how she deals with that and how she goes around to various people that she has wronged and she seeks their forgiveness, and how that affects her and how that affects them and how it affects the young man who is helping her get around to all of these places. So it's really beautifully done in that way. Like Mrs. Kipp, I feel like this is the perfect example of what good Christian fiction can be as a genre. Not at all a copy of like the world's kind of story or a secular story, but a story that is able to really tackle topics of life from a biblical perspective, from an eternal perspective, from a Christian perspective, and to be able to look at life and death through that lens. And so I feel like it was really well done overall. Our male protagonist in this story, there were, I feel like, loose threads left at the end of the story, which seemed to be an intentional choice on the part of the author. The title is Where the Blue Sky Begins, which is kind of metaphorical of heaven. And not kind of, it definitely is. That's straight up said in the text of the book towards the end of the story. It's, the idea of the beginning of eternity. When this woman passes on, she is, beginning her life in eternity in heaven. But I think it's also about the young man in the story and the new life that he is finding, but temporal, like on earth. Because he is, for most of the story, he is self-centered and self-absorbed and vain. He has some good qualities in him. Otherwise, you would totally hate the story. But you can see that underneath that exterior, there is some genuine kindness. There's some genuine concern for other people's welfare. There's a genuine desire to do the right thing. And so he grows and he develops throughout the story. But you feel like at the end, he's really just beginning his journey of change and growth. And you don't really get to see it in him. So it seemed to be an intentional choice on the part of the author. And I think that's also, like, at the end of the story, I don't think it's any spoiler that the lady passes on, because that's the main idea here that's happening. And so I think that there is, like, she is passing on to her eternal home, and he is beginning a new life, but not quite necessarily as a believer or Christian, because he doesn't really do that. Like, he doesn't really make a definitive choice. He just begins to see the possibilities of it. He begins, like, seeds have been planted, and he is beginning to think about these things. So it's like he's just beginning a new chapter of his life, and you don't really get to see it come to fruition. And there's several things that happen in the very last chapter. And it's like, you see, okay, he's on the right path. He's going in the right direction. And you have this sense that he is going to arrive where he needs to at some point, but you don't get to go with him there. You're just at the beginning of his journey. So part of me wished there was a little more of that, or wished that that maybe this would be a series and there's another book that, you know, has him moving on. But I think that was intentional, and that is how the story ends. And it goes from there in your imagination. So I think that might be what it is. So otherwise, it was very good. I really enjoyed it. 4.5 stars, I think, for this one. I definitely agree with everyone who enjoyed it last year and was talking about it. And thanks to everyone who reviewed it and put it on my radar, because I am really glad I read it. So then I picked up, and I don't have it on me right now, but I picked up Godmersham Park by Gill Hornby, which is about Jane Austen's family, her brother and his family, and the governess who comes to teach their daughter. And already I'm loving it. I'm only like a few chapters in, but I'm loving it, enjoying it very much. And I hope it continues in the vein that it has started in, because it's great. Really enjoying it. So I will probably be back with more thoughts on that one later this week. It is Wednesday afternoon, and beautiful sunny day, as you can see. Thus far this week, they keep forecasting, you know, like possible rain, etc. But so far, it's been pretty sunny and beautiful, with, you know, some clouds and a threat of rain and maybe a few sprinkles here and there, but mostly just beautiful weather. So I have bad news. So I picked up Godmersham Park by Gill Hornby earlier this week, and I was really enjoying it for the first few chapters of it. I loved the prose and the narrative style. It was going really well, and I was enjoying being introduced to the different characters and the development of the story as it was happening. But then, first of all, it definitely moves at a slow pace, for sure. And secondly, I wasn't sure where the author was going with her depiction of the protagonist's character. And I was a little bit like, is she for real with this girl? Like, is the way she's being presented, is this being presented unironically? Or is the author pointing out the inconsistencies in the character's perspective? Or is she really just presenting her the way she is, matter-of-factly, and intending her to be that way? So I guess that sounds really kind of cryptic. Let's see if I can find an example. So a couple of things that I made a note on that particularly stood out to me was the beginning of one chapter. It said, "A country house peopled by those who have known only contentment, whose natures are forced by their own happy lot to be nothing but even, is a temperate island." So it's describing the setting of Godmersham Park, which is the name of the book, and which is the estate of Edward Austen, Jane Austen's brother. And it is, by all accounts, a beautiful estate and a prosperous estate. And Edward Austen was very well to do due to his being the heir to this estate. And the main character in this story, Anne Sharp, she is hired as a governess at this estate. And so from her perspective, she sees this estate as kind of like an idyllic, temperate island. And what she's saying here is that the people who live there, namely the Austen family, Edward Austen's family, that they are naturally happy and content because they're living in the lot of luxury. And again, my question is, am I supposed to accept that unironically? Because I think we all know that just because you have a huge estate and are prosperous does not mean you are therefore content and happy. Contentment and happiness are not a direct result of the amount of your possessions. There are many content people who are poor, and there are many miserable people who are very wealthy. So just if the Austen family was content and happy, then it was because they chose to be. Certainly their lives were easier in many ways because they were prosperous and privileged, but that doesn't mean that they were automatically happy. There are many unhappy people who are very wealthy. And then on the next page, it's talking about how she has £35 per annum as an allowance from her father, which is not enough to live on. And she also gets £35 per annum in her role as governess. And it says she lived more or less independent of all men. Because the girl, Anne Sharp, she's portrayed in this story as very much like a proto-feminist. Mary Wollstonecraft is her hero, and she has a very feminist perspective throughout the story. But this one, again, like, are we being serious here? Because literally half of her money comes from her father's allowance and the other half comes from Edward Austen. So I don't see how she's living independently of all men. And then one other, it's talking about things that are happening in the area. And it says there was a proposal in the air which sent Zachary, who was one of the servants in the house, into paroxysms, wherever the accent goes in that word, of vicarious joy, while Anne silently prayed for the safety of yet another poor female soul. And I was like, prayed for the safety of yet another poor female soul. Presumably, this female soul desired to be engaged, to be married. So I started doing like a little bit of digging. Like I was trying to find out, like, am I supposed to be taking this character seriously? Is there going to be, like some development? She just seemed extremely narrow-minded, opinionated, self-absorbed, and borderline arrogant and superior in her attitudes, in all her dealings with the Austens. Although on the one hand, she states that she found them kind and happy people. On the other hand, she had very definitely distinctive feelings of superiority over them, and the ways they thought and the ways they interacted with each other as a family and their belief systems, etc. So I was seeing some hints of development in her character as she spent more time with them. But at the same time, I was like, okay, where is this story going? Because it seemed to be setting up an illicit relationship with Henry Austen, one of Jane Austen's other brothers. And so this whole story is based on mostly, almost entirely, real people. And as much as we know of their real stories as is possible, the author was attempting to write factually, but in a novel style, as a fiction book. So she's, working with established fact, but creating a story out of it. And it seemed like she was developing an illicit relationship with Henry Austen. Illicit because not only is she the governess, and Henry Austen was the son of a gentleman, had at that time a prosperous career himself, and more importantly, was married. By all accounts, happily married, is everything that I have ever previously read about Henry Austen. I've never heard any indication that there was any sort of friction or wanderings in his first marriage, which was to a cousin of the Austen family. So definitely his character, his personality, I believe, was generally known to be fairly gregarious and fun-loving and possibly flirtatious. But it doesn't follow that he was also a philanderer. And so it seemed to be setting up a relationship with him. And at the same time, Anne Sharp, who is known to be a good friend of Jane Austen, who, as far as I had read in the story, they hadn't met yet. They had only conversed vicariously through Anne's pupils' correspondence with Jane Austen. So they had not met in person yet. It seemed like the author was also setting up a relationship with Jane Austen and suggesting possibly more than a friendship with her. And when I started looking at the reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, etc., because this did not jive with my understanding of the reality of the actual facts. And basically, what 90% of people in the reviews on Goodreads and Amazon were saying was that the book moves very slowly. That was the largest complaint about it. Many people complain about that. It moves very slowly, and it has a very unsatisfactory ending because the author is building up this storyline that she cannot then bring to fruition because it does not align with historical fact. So yes, I was right. She was building up, she was setting up to illicit relationships, potential illicit relationships. Like she was just setting up, like nothing had progressed to that point yet, as far as what I read in the story. But she was definitely building to that end. But she couldn't actually bring those relationships to fruition of any kind because it does not align with historical fact, because there is no evidence of either of those things. I guess I should have put a spoiler warning on that because the writing is really good. So I'm sure that there are many people who would be interested in still reading this story. And it was very difficult for me to make this choice because Tammy bought this for me for my birthday at the Protagonist Pub, and I don't want to waste her very kind and generous gift. But at the same time, I feel like it's sort of fitting because Tammy is like the queen of DNFing. So I feel like it's actually almost an honor to her to DNF a book that I was really looking forward to reading and very excited about reading. But I think I'm going to DNF it because it is completely based on historical fact, and yet the author tries to develop a plot that is completely unhistorical, and so then she can't even finish that plot. So the ending is that she cuts both those threads. It kind of doesn't make sense to me to continue reading that. So as sad as I am about that, I am going to DNF this. I've written in it something, so I think I'll probably just pop it in a little free library, I think, and pass it on to someone, because I am sure that there are people who really enjoyed it because, like I said, the writing is excellent. The prose and the narrative is great. It's not aping Jane Austen. Some people said, like, she totally captured Jane Austen's voice. Maybe in the letters that were exchanged, I can see that, but in the actual prose and narrative, I don't think she's trying to copy Jane Austen, I think, but she does have her very own wonderful style of writing, and I enjoyed her prose and the way that she wrote the story and the narrative style, and I think she does well with, you know, the characterization and who the people are. It's just the fact the way that she played around with historical fact and characters and people that I love, like they're my own family in a sense, you know what I'm saying? Like, not realistically because I don't actually know them, but real historic characters. And she's messing around with their lives in a way that, to me, doesn't really honor their memories fully. So I kind of didn't love that. So I am going to DNF this, sadly. And so I am a little bit at a loss as to what to read next. So I'm going to dig around in my Kindle and my Hoopla because I don't have any other hard copies with me at the moment. I won't be home until later tonight, and I have some time to read. So I will see where my mood takes me and what I end up reading next. So thank you for listening to that very long and detailed review of a book that I am DNFing. That kind of doesn't really make sense, but booktube life, I guess. All right, talk to you next time. Bye. Okay, it is the middle of the morning on Saturday, and I cannot get the lighting right on this video to save my life. It's the middle of the morning. It's beautiful and bright in here, but because the light is streaming through this window, it's going a little crazy. So whatever, it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to do one final clip about what I am working on currently. in my books before I upload this video. First of all, I started this, Seeking Mansfield by Kate Watson, and it is a retelling of Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, which I recently read and had never read a retelling, so I was curious to try one. And ultimately, I got a few chapters in, and I could already tell this was just way too YA for me. These teenagers were acting like teenagers, like stereotypical teenagers, and it was just so immature. I can handle a YA if it is really well done, but this is the kind of YA that I just, I can't. So, yikes, that was a library book. Anyways, so the end of that one. I'm sure that its target audience would probably enjoy it, but not my middle-aged self. And then this one, A Million Little Choices by Tamara Alexander, which is her most recent work and is contemporary fiction, unlike her other books, which are all historic fiction. This one, I believe, does have, I have not encountered it yet, but I think that there is a historic timeline that is, I don't know if there's a dual narrative or if it's just like letters or diary. I'm not sure. I feel there's a historic storyline, I think, that comes into play at some point, but I'm not there yet. I'm just a little bit into it, finding it interesting. Tamara Alexander's writing is such that she just draws you into the story and you don't even notice how she's telling it. You're not paying attention to her style of narrative or her prose or anything. You're just sucked into the story and the characters and what's going on. So I am really enjoying it. Oh, the ribbon fell out. And this, I just wanted to show you, this is the bookmark I'm using. It's my favorite bookmark. I'm not sure how long it will last. My oldest son made it for me many years ago for Mother's Day in Sunday school or something. I just want to show you one thing about it. Okay, see that? That is not a steaming hot ninja. That is a steaming hot cup of coffee. So, anyways, that's that one. And the other thing that I'm working on currently, besides Les Miserables, which continues to be ongoing in process, reading a little every day, this is The Watsons, which is a fragment by Jane Austen, and this particular one was finished by John Coates. And I have now passed the part that Jane Austen had written, and so now I'm into the part where John Coates has written it, and I'm enjoying it, and I will read all the way to the end because I want to know how he sees the story playing out. But I think even if you can mimic Jane Austen's style of prose and narrative seamlessly, and her dialogue, which I feel like the prose he does pretty well with, the dialogue not so much. And even if you can capture her wit and her sense of humor and the surprisingly little humorous sentences that pop up, even if all of that is in play, which to one extent or another he does well with most of that, Jane Austen's strength is her characters and how intimately she is acquainted with the human spirit and her ability to portray humans so well that you just feel like you really know them. And so far, I'm about a third of the way in. So far, I feel like that's where this is going to fail me, because she didn't really have enough time to adequately introduce all of her characters before someone else has to take over, because that's all that there is to the story. So you feel like you don't really have time to know them intimately like you would if there was a full-length novel. So at the same time, it's interesting. I will talk more about it when I have it completely read and am wrapping it up here. I was going to show you a book haul of all the things that I got for my birthday, but when I filmed that, it ended up being like 20 some minutes all by itself because, dude, so many. So I've already got it filmed, so I'm just gonna throw that as an extra video out this week, later on this week, so you can see that if you're interested in my book haul. And so that is it for this week. I do want to close with a clip of some videos from my garden. I don't have much of a garden, but every year we do a little bit to improve and grow. I don't have a green thumb at all. Anything that is flourishing in my garden is by God's grace, and I say that seriously. It has nothing to do with me, and it definitely doesn't have anything to do with our soil or our environment here, because we are at the bottom of a hill our soil collects all of the rain. Anytime it rains and it pools in the backyard, it doesn't drain very well. There's a creek just past our backyard. So when that overflows, like, you know, our yard is a muddy mess. Plus we have rocks galore. The name of our street is Rockbridge. When we started trying to have a garden here, we figured out why it was called Rockbridge. So all God. The flowers are all God. So enjoy this little bit of beauty from our garden, and I will see you next time. Bye. Look at the irises blooming. So beautiful. Although I don't have as many iris blooms this year. I think we probably need to thin it out. And my catmint going gangbusters as usual. And my peonies, look at all these buds. I think this plant is 3 or 4 years old. And it's got like 25 or so buds on it. It's the most it's ever had. Can't wait till they bloom. And our crepe myrtle is a few years old also. It's getting nice and tall. Look at that.